Okay, so hello
Okay.
everyone. Thanks for joining us today. I am Elisa, a Woman Tech Maker Ambassador here in Albania. So, what is Woman Tech Maker Albania? Woman Tech Maker Albania is an association of technology enthusiasts that promotes diversity and inclusion in technology. So, this is the second episode or the second meeting of Albanian Role Models in Tech, which is a series of events that will capture and share successful stories of successful women in technology. These role models will share with us what they have learned during their careers, what drives them, what inspires them, but also they can share with us life and career advices. Today, we are super happy to have Jona Babi as our keynote speaker. Jona has a brilliant career, not only in some of the best universities of the world, just mentioning Stanford and Harvard is, I think it's enough, but also she has worked in some of the most prestigious tech companies like Ericsson and Apple. Without further ado, I give the word to our keynote speaker, Jona, and I thank her for joining us today.
Hi, guys. Happy to be here. Thank you so much for the invitation. I was asked to prepare a topic, a little bit of introduction, and then a topic that I'd want to talk about. And among all the topics that I was thinking that I've been studying recently, I thought of talking about IoT or Internet of Things. Because it's like so up and coming, and I did quite a bit of research in like one specific area of IoT recently, so it piqued my attention, and it's enormous and gigantic, and I'm only gonna be scratching the surface, if any. Let me share my screen with you guys. Let's see. Give me 1 second. Okay. Let me know if you can see my screen.
Yes.
Okay, great. All right, so who am I, first of all, and where am I from? I'm from Elbasan, which is a little city in the middle of Albania. I come from a very tiny family. I only have a younger brother and my parents still live in Elbasan. I try to go back, not as often as I wish, and my brother is in London right now. Um, since a kid, I was very, I'd say, like set on. I wanted to go to the States because it's such like, I don't know, a dream for kids growing up in my generation. Everyone kept telling us, okay, you gotta go to the States, you gotta go to the States. It was more like an obsession than a dream. So at every second of my life, I was like, okay, what university should I apply? What should I do to basically make it to the States? Um, and then once I was like 18, I was trying to pick a major. I didn't manage to go to the States. It was very difficult in terms of I had to take SATs and I don't know, and like do applications and TOEFL and stuff like that. I didn't know any of that. My parents didn't. So for me, I was basically still stuck in Albania. And I was trying to think what's the best thing that I could study that could take me to the US eventually. It was still in my mind. And I mean, my family is mostly architects and civil engineers, but I didn't see like an advantage of that. Um, I thought computer engineering is the closest thing that could take me to Silicon Valley, so I started studying computer engineering. And since I couldn't make it to Albania, out of Albania to the States, the second best thing that I could do is manage to go to Greece. So I did undergrads in Greece in Greek. So it was a roller coaster. The first 2 years were kind of like, I was like, why am I here? Why didn't I go to Italy like every other Albanian? And the language was quite difficult, even though I did speak it as a kid with my grandma. Um, After a year and a half or 2 years, I kind of got more used to it and started enjoying living in Greece, the major, but still in the back of my mind was like, I need to get to the States. The first day of undergrads, I went to my professor and I asked him, okay, what do I do? He had done his PhD at University of Illinois, Urbana-Champaign, UIUC. And basically, I asked him, what do I do to make it to Stanford and to Silicon Valley? And he's like, oh, just study, just get good grades and you'll be there. So I made it. I got good grades. I applied for a PhD in electrical engineering. I got it to Stanford. It was basically, I think that was like the happiest moment in my life so far. So I had dreamed about it as a kid. I always wanted to go there. I finally get there. It was as I had expected it to be. Beautiful. That year it was drought in California. It didn't rain at all. I was in shorts. In February, weather is very important to me. The professors were amazing. The students were from all over the world. I had a blast. I didn't actually stay for the PhD because I thought that industry is a lot more interesting and attractive over here. So I got my master's in electrical engineering and I was like, okay, I'm going to go 1 or 2 years into the industry and then I'm going to come back into academia. Needless to say, I never went back. So I worked for a couple of years for Ericsson, which was, I mean, I did a lot of like board design, hardware, routers, business to business sales. A few years later, Apple poached me and I also wanted to move into more consumer electronics. So moved into Apple. I worked on the touch sensors of like iPhones, iPad, basically the whole screen. And then after these two companies, I was kind of getting a bit more like stale and bored. And then I was thinking like, okay, what do I do next? Should I move into a startup? Should I just do, I don't know, move countries? Like I needed something new. And I thought that, oh, I only have a lot of engineering background, but I really don't have much of a business background and don't know a lot of things that have to do with like marketing, sales, like things like that. So decided to go back to school, and I actually only applied to Harvard and to Stanford. And because I'd already been to Stanford, I wanted to kind of do like see it as a challenge and go to the East Coast and see if I like the East Coast to kind of get to know the culture. It was a great decision because Silicon Valley is very tech oriented, is great, but it's a bubble. There is not a lot of like finance. Going to the East Coast, I went through business school with the idea that I'm going to check every other job out there in the world and see if it's better than the one I'm doing now and if I like it more and if I'm better at it. So I went through like, okay, let me check consulting. I went through doing VC work, venture capital work in Boston through a tech fund, went to New York, did a startup, doing a startup now, a fintech startup that is in Boston. So like basically a lot of experimentation to try to figure out what you want to do. And last, what am I going to do now? I'm working with a fintech startup, which I started to really, really like the kind of the fintech area and industry. But I don't think I want a startup yet. So basically my goal now is to continue to do fintech. I'm going to be with Leverage is the name of the startup for the summer. And then in September, most potentially joining like a bigger fintech company. That's pretty much all about me. You can ask me later in the questions anything else you want to know. Happy to chat about school, work, or any other things. I was going to jump into my topic, IoT. Just like a little bit of an agenda. I'm going to talk quickly like what is IoT? Like it's such a spread out term. Internet of Things is so broad. A little bit of history and why is IoT happening now? Why was it not so hot and coming before? So what are basically the things that are able to enable it right now, which are actually pretty technical? What are the main industries is so broad. I'm just going to mention a few use cases of each. And then how can you get involved if you want to? It's so broad that I'm sure everyone can find some niche part of it that you'd like. All right, so what is IoT? Internet of Things is basically um, billions of physical devices around the world that are connected to each other and that are sharing data. So everything that has an on and an off switch, think about like a microwave, a light, an air condition, a fridge, a tractor. Think about like a tool that is used to dig holes for oil. Like think about anything that is like kind of an electrical appliance, kind of like it has an on and off switch, can be definitely connected to the internet, can be collecting any sort of data and sharing the data with other devices across the globe. So they don't need a person to manage this communication. I know it's very vague, bear with me. We'll go into, in a few slides, we'll go into like very specific use cases. There is, this day, there is over 7 billion connected devices. And as far as I remember, there'll be like, in about 5 years, there'll be over 40 billion devices connected to the internet. So how important is this? Just to give it to you in dollar signs, because maybe numbers don't make much sense. It's like, okay, everyone has an iPhone, it doesn't mean much, right? 7 or 6 billion iPhones. The industry, business and consumer industry will be spending, or has been spending, about $1 trillion of dollars money in Internet of Things. Like, why now? Why, like, what's like, when was the first time that this thing happened? The first phrase Internet of Things has been mentioned in the late 90s, but it was not yet possible to connect these small devices. And you'd say like, okay, what's the problem? It's a small device, you put some like, you know, chip that connects it to the internet, you connect it to the internet. Why not? I'll tell you why not. So first of all, the devices before the 90s, all the transistors were, on the chips were pretty big. So we're talking, I don't know how much familiar you guys are with Moore's law, which basically says it's super simple. Every 2 years, the amount of transistors that you are able to put in a chip is doubled. It's kind of like plateauing right now, which means on the other side that every 2 years, the size of the chip will get half. So we're talking about sensors that the IoT devices or sensors can be as small as your finger and need to be deployed in the middle of nowhere to collect data in the desert or in space, or in, I don't know, or like medical devices. So all of these chips need to be really, really tiny and be able to have some super, super tiny battery that will support them for life, and be able to include there like a wireless transmitter and everything. So because the chips were not small enough and they were very, very expensive, you couldn't really deploy all of these 7 billion chips everywhere, because it would have cost you a fortune, and they're not sustainable. They cannot stay there for like a couple of years and transmit data. So it was basically economically not feasible because of the size of the chip. Now, you know that the chips are basically fitting into like a split of hair. And they're very, very cheap to produce because of manufacturing processes and cheap labor in third world countries. So basically, it's really possible to produce 7 billion of these chips and just deploy them, and they will be self-sufficient. The second part of it is internet, basically. So back in the days when we started getting, phones, and usually how it works is that you have like a specific bandwidth that you can only transmit so much data at a specific moment of time. So with the discovery of IPv6 and with 5G coming right now, you don't have to limit the amount of devices that you can connect. Until now, we were able, if you want to put more devices, you have to put more towers up. If you want to put more phones, if you want to deploy more phones, you have to build more towers, you have to put more wireless chips. As of 5G, with the same amount of towers that you build, with the same amount of chips, you can connect millions and billions of more of devices. So now there is basically the possibility that all of these 7 billion devices that we have built can come online without a huge extra investment in infrastructure that is going to be needed for them to communicate and send data to each other and to basically data centers where they're going to be saved. And the third and last enabler is actually data centers and cloud computing. If I deploy 7 billion chips like 2 decades ago in, I don't know, in like the desert, trying to get the conditions and weather, for example, I would have no computer power to be able to process all of these data and make sense out of it. I would get, you know, every split of a second data. There'll be not enough, you know, unless I like gather all the data centers that were there in the world just to process this for the, you know, for like one specific use case. So now with all the data centers that have been built around the world and their huge capacity, and how easily we can get all of this information aggregated into cloud computing, it's pretty easy to get the information from all of these chips, process it and show it in some ways that is basically really easy to understand and to make sense out of it, basically use. Okay, I'm going to move on into, last thing is that all of these have made it super, super cheap, and cheap means that you can scale, that you can have, you know, billions and probably in a decade more than trillions of these chips around the world, around the houses, around the cities, trying to gather information to basically make our lives better. Now, how are they going to make our lives better? So why are we trying to do all of these Internet of Things basically in the world? Yeah, it's cool, it's fun, but like, what is going to make better? Let's go a little bit industry by industry to understand a few use cases, and I'll try to literally scratch the surface because there is so many use cases and so many more industries that are missing from my next slides, to like how is it making the world a better place. Okay, so one of the first ones is manufacturing. It's usually called also industrial IoT or Industry 4.0 or Industrial Revolution. There's a lot of terms these days that are used for manufacturing. So how does it improve manufacturing? A lot of manufacturers have a lot of robots, but basically these robots are really difficult to set up, difficult to like maneuver. It's like a lot of manual work. Imagine these robots all have a lot of chips everywhere, or like sensors mostly. I'm going to switch from chips to sensors because it's a lot easier to understand for IoT use cases. That robot, let's say, doesn't have to, you know, be programmed to specifically to when you see a person do this, because like people come in all shapes, they might not have cameras everywhere, but they have basically sensors and they're communicating with each other that, you know, like when some person is moving around the factory, the first robot that is like, I don't know, 3 kilometers away is communicating with everyone else that, hey, you like someone is coming, and then everyone is adjusting into their position. And then in the end of the month, you can basically gather all of that data and look at it, like how often people have to go in, when do people go in more often, and then actually program, like get it back to the robots in terms of machine learning, that they would now expect that usually around noon there is people coming around to, you know, check some parts of the machines, and, you know, like basically they're already prepared. So you don't have to program anything like that. You just deploy a bunch of sensors in different parts of these factories, and basically your production is more efficient, your injury rate goes down, you can operate these robots, you don't have to stop them and start them again, So basically you're able to produce more at a shorter period of time. So that means big economical gain and big basically humanity gains of like not getting injuries. This is like one of the maybe 1,000 use cases in manufacturing. Automobiles. So self-driving. Self-driving cars are literally like equipped with so many sensors. So basically, what does IoT mean? IoT means that all of these cars have like a bunch of information that they're sending to each other. So once two cars are driving and one of them is coming up the corner, and then the driver doesn't have enough human brain speed to stop on time, the cars are already sending information to each other and getting information from each other, saying that with the GPS locations, with the speed, with like how far they are. So by the time the drivers don't see it, the cars will immediately stop without even crashing because they have already been communicating. A lot of other things, such as the cars are kind of giving each other information on, let's say, traffic, and being like, okay, you don't really have to open Google Maps and see which is the route and stuff, but like on the fly they'll tell you, okay, you should probably, they won't even tell you, they'll take a right to just avoid traffic or avoid like something that happened on the road. Let's say part of the road got destroyed or something like that. So the cars would basically just transmit a lot of information, all of these sensors all the time, in terms of anything that you need. And also, you don't have to bring the car for maintenance into, let's say, your dealership every 3 months, or wait for something, oh, like there's a light going off, something broke, I need to go. Basically, these sensors will be connected into your phone, and you can immediately see that, oh, my oil is low. You don't even have to open the car. You just see, like, oh, my oil is low. Oh, it just seems that the motor is like producing a little bit more heat than usual because the temperature sensor is saying that. Maybe I should go check that. And you will not be an idiot like me when you go to the car dealer and they're telling you that, oh, you know what, you have to change the tires, and you have to change this, and you have to change this, and you go with a bill of like $10,000, and you probably didn't need to change any of those. So you can basically have control of your car, and also the dealerships can just like plug into that and see immediately what's wrong without like having to do all of these diagnoses. These are kind of like two blended use cases for automobiles. Agriculture, okay, which is something maybe not so hot and sexy for people that work in tech, but it's so up and coming. I actually have a lot of friends that are doing miracles in agriculture in the Middle East, where it's usually not very much possible to have like great harvesting. Okay, so usually agriculture, you'd like have disasters such as, oh my god, there is like storm or rain, and then just flooded all the fields, or basically like one year we can have crops, the other year, sorry, we cannot have crops because some things happen, I don't know, like you didn't plow the land correctly and things like that. What IoT has made possible is that you deploy these sensors that are maybe as big as your nails. You just literally throw them in your land everywhere and anywhere, and it's able to tell you exactly what the land needs, how's the temperature down, how's the humidity, like basically it's connected to your tractor or to whatever machines you're using to plow and to water them and to put pesticides, and it tells you specifically what do you need to do in any second, basically based on the parameters like that the sensors are transmitting. And then you don't even have to, like, say, throw equal or uniform amount of pesticide or water everywhere, because different parts of the land have different needs. So you just follow the machines that are doing those things, follow the sensor data and deploy anything that the land needs. This ways you're getting the farmers huge wins in terms of money. Basically, the crops will be healthier, you can plow the land much more often, you know exactly what's going wrong, you can predict. So there is like no more disasters obviously there's some disasters if the world has COVID, but most of the things that can go wrong are easily preventable, and your productivity is much higher, and you get a lot more money for the work that you're doing. Next one, smart cities, which is actually my favorite, to be honest. Smart cities. So what are smart cities? Smart cities are basically, imagine that you have sensors deployed everywhere in the city, like in the lights, in the highways. Some of the use cases which I love are maybe borderline privacy invasion and things like that. So it's to fight crime. So you can have, not only cameras, but like even just voice recognition, because cameras, it's like just such an ambiguous term and such ambiguous thing in smart cities, but like voice recognition on like streets and places, and when when things happen that are recognized from these sensors that could be a potential problem, like a crime or anything, the police can come very quickly. This is like such an easy use case, but there is a lot of more complicated ones. For example, you want to build a new highway on the city, so you want to decide where this highway is going to go. So you can have sensors on understanding the traffic patterns of your city and trying to understand where should this highway go through and from and to, gathering data for like maybe years to understand how has the traffic pattern changed and where should you build this highway in order to decrease the congestion of the city. There is like lots of things that smart cities can be doing with IoT, and I think it's like obviously a huge use case and broad as the other ones. Next one is smart homes. Is that the one that I have next? Yep. Basically, let's see, smart homes, oops, sorry, here you go. So smart homes, we're used a little bit with smart homes, like for example, there is like the Nest thermostat that you can just on your way home, you are like, oh, I want my house to be warm, so you pop up your phone, you turn on your thermostat, turn on, you put your desired temperature, and by the time you're home from the car, your house is as warm as you want. But it's not just that. So the idea of smart homes is basically having sensors everywhere in the house and in all your devices. Let's say you are coming home, but you also want to turn on your oven to preheat because you want to cook dinner. You also want to know if you have enough veggies in the fridge. So you would basically check, the fridge will have sensors and be like, okay, you're missing eggs, would have like camera vision recognition, you're missing eggs, you're missing this, you're missing this. So when you before leaving work, you look at your phone and you're like, oh, okay, I have a message from the fridge that says I'm missing this, so I have to stop at the grocery store. Okay, then I can preheat my oven at this time, and then I can do this. But what if you come from work every day at 7 p.m. and you usually cook every day? So then your system already knows that it's going to send you a message. You don't have to check your message. Is going to send you a pop-up notification that, oh, you have to go to the grocery store. The oven will be already preheated and the house will be already in your desired temperature. And when you move from the living room to the bedroom, they will already open the small light in your bedroom. They will close the blinders on your living room. So things like that are a little bit more bougie and more high end for smart housing. Maybe just making your life a lot easier. Maybe not solving critical problems for now as smart cities or agriculture, but it's still pretty cool and exciting. And hopefully most of the world will get there eventually. Healthcare, which is really, really critical. Just a quick use case on radio images. So there is all of these radio image companies and heavy machinery or appliances that you have in hospitals that are so large, so bulky, they are so inefficient. They're radiating people with x-rays or anything because they're not really known how to be operated efficiently. There is so many pieces that you have to set up, and companies have sent a bunch of application engineers there. it's really, really non-efficient. If you put all of just chips inside, you don't really have to know and send people and do maintenance of these that takes like months, and it's like downtime and cost a lot. You can literally monitor every single piece of that machine with these sensors and understand before it breaks that, oh, I have to do maintenance on this part because it's going to break, which means that I can preemptively go there, change the specific part, or remotely update it, and which that will save the hospital a month of sending this huge machinery to where it was manufactured to change it, or sending a team of 10 engineers, which will cost a lot to them. So either way, you save a lot of money, you save a lot of time, and you save people from radiation. Let's move on to the next. I'm very passionate about the health one, so I'll stop talking before I take all the time on that one. Logistics. So logistics is such a nightmare. Imagine you are like shipping a box from, I usually ship stuff to my parents from, I'm in California right now, in San Francisco, so from San Francisco all the way to Albania. It's like the shipping way, it's basically, you never know where it is. You're gonna track it until the borders of US. Then when it goes to Albania, it's another another company, sorry, it goes to Germany or whatever, to London, and then it goes to Albania, and then all of these shipping containers can stay or like either through the sea or through air, they'll stay in the customs. They haven't gotten clearance, you don't know where they are. Like you're losing so much time. A lot of them are perishable, so it's basically a nightmare. What if you had just a little chip? Like there is chips that cost like 50 cents in each of these boxes, and you can have GPS access the whole time. How easy would that be? I know there is like a lot of policies to get done, and handshakes between countries and privacies and all of that, but that would be amazing. One very specific, it can be called part of logistics, it can be called a different area of IoT, is freights. There's a bunch of cool companies working on freight management actually these days. What happens with freights is that like you also want to know if the things that you're moving are, let's say, ice cream, you want to know, or like very specific vaccines, you want to know if they are they have been hot or warm, or because maybe you cannot use them if they have gone through a higher temperature. So all of these transportation freight management is basically having, I don't know, temperature sensors in every box that you are moving. And maybe not ice cream, because if it melts it'll go back again, but like vaccines, or like very important cargo that has restrictions on temperature or on movements. When I was at Ericsson, we had like a huge problem with a bunch of boards return, like loss of so many millions of dollars. And what was the problem? The problem was just the transportation. Like some of the parts of the chip, yes, they were not tested well, but transportation was like really bumpy and really through hot. So like part of them had disconnected, and we had so much loss just because we couldn't monitor the freights that were basically bringing them to the customers. Security, it's an issue that is coming up and up again and again. Basically, it's so sensitive. The more things you connect to the internet, the more possibilities you have to hack the internet, to get into the back doors, to leak data. So these like IoT in itself is like a huge vulnerability to security. So there's a lot of companies that are trying to see how do you like include security basically in these sensors. Is it going to be more expensive? Not only how do you include security, but like how do you make sure that all of these new devices are not adding complete vulnerability, and then on the top of that, how do you create these new protocols like that are going to be, now dealing with not only one phone that can do a lot of things, like how do you make it as light as possible for these sensors? Last but not least is oil and gas. Oil and gas, basically, there's all of these huge machineries in the desert that you don't know, they're underground. You don't know what's going wrong. You can't see it. If something goes wrong, blows up, it takes months and years and billions of dollars to fix it. The idea is to just have sensors everywhere there and have these data report in the dashboard or on your phone, and understand basically, what's going on in each of these sensors, and see like, oh, some of them is wearing up, so we go do preventive maintenance. Yeah, I mean, and you don't have to have anyone there. You can do most remote. You don't have to send people and pay them gold because you have to like live in the middle of nowhere in the deserts of Sahara or Saudi Arabia to be able to maintain and get a feeling of what's going on in these oil rigs. So this is like basically, again, scratching the surface of the industries. There is so much more. I was going to move quickly on how can you get involved. I was just going to show you a little bit map, or like where are the places that the IoT market growth it's kind of happening in the next, or predicted to happen in the next 5 years. So as you can see, the best areas to be that are using these technologies more quickly is like Southeast Asia, Australia, and New Zealand. I mean, I don't know if you guys have been to China, but like it's so many sensors everywhere and like so automated. Like usually you have your phone to unlock your doors, obviously pay, do everything and anything in with like the same 5 apps, WeChat and whatever they have. Like India is like a good place for trial because it's like really cheap, labor and stuff, so you can basically manufacture and deploy a lot of things, or you can like try a lot of new technologies. Mid is basically Europe and US. Obviously there's a lot of IoT companies obviously in Europe and the US, but the application rate is not as high as these Southeast Asians or Australia places, and there's lack of these growth in South America, Latin America, Africa, and Middle East. So if you want to be in the heart of action nowadays, Southeast Asia is a good place to be. And I was going to go through quickly a few actually very, very big names, kind of like the top 5 companies that are dealing with IoT these days. I'm just going to go through all of them. So Cisco, Cisco is one of the huge companies that does telecommunication and networking. So when I said that is IoT is enabled from this 5G, Cisco is like one of the top pioneers of 5G. So they are trying to do a lot of smart things. If you go into their website, they have a lot of smart solutions for companies. They usually sell to businesses. Since they have these 5G is like a perfect way for them to monetize. The second one is Huawei, which is a big competitor of Cisco, which mostly has the Southeast Asia market. It's actually banned for now in the US. So both of them are highly trying to capitalize on their tight 5G connection with IoT. And I actually worked for Ericsson before, which is another third competitor of Cisco and of Huawei. So I really deeply understand this connection of 5G and IoT and how it's working and how it can be monetized. The third one is Microsoft. Microsoft is trying to get into, so Microsoft is on all your computers, so they're trying to get into your houses. How can they do how can they get into like smart homes and things like that, and like smart cities? So they exist everywhere in the computers. And so is IBM. IBM has a lot of hardware. So Microsoft exists in your software, but IBM exists in your hardware. So how can they both capitalize on what they have already deployed? Can they put sensors? Can they sell you more stuff? Last but not least is Google, which basically gets its heads dirty everywhere. So Google has, as you know, Waymo in terms of self-driving cars. It has a branch called Sidewalk Labs, which is basically doing smart cities. It's based out of New York City. And they are in your phone, so they're trying, and they want to try to get in your car, so they're trying to get basically everywhere, in terms of smart homes and smart cities and smart cars. Wherever they are, they're trying to capitalize on that, and what can they add value. This was all. I mean, I'm happy to take questions, anything that you want to ask about IoT. I don't claim to be an expert at all, but I can give you some points or hints, or about myself, or about US, or about Boston, about California, anything. Very happy to.
Thank you very much, Jona, for the really nice presentation. Now, as Jona said, we can take some questions. So please, in order to ask a question, unmute your microphone and open your camera so we get to know you, and just ask this question directly to Jona.
Or if you want, you can also put it in the chat. I know it might be intimidating to open your
Oh,
camera
okay.
and speak up. I see, I see one in the chat. Okay. You can put more questions in your chat. I think it's from Rhea. Hi, Rhea. Rhea says, well, thank you very much. My pleasure to be here. I think everyone can see the question. Okay, she would like to know, why did I choose electrical engineering as my master's degree subject? Let's see, does this technical provide more opportunities? Okay, so that's a very good question. When I chose it, I wasn't knowledgeable at all. So basically, once you apply I chose computer engineering because I kind of knew that this is going to be the future. But when you apply to schools, especially in the US for grad school, there's usually a couple of majors that you can get in, and depends on the school. It's either computer science or electrical engineering, or some of them have some departments that are called EECS. So electrical engineering, computer and electrical engineering, something like that. The name doesn't matter almost at all, because they roughly have the same classes, the same departments mixed between these names under where they sit. So I applied for electrical because, looking at the classes, I was doing chip design, as you understood a bit more. So it's like highly hardware. It's computer engineering, but it's hardware. It's not a lot of software. So it felt under Stanford, it felt under the electrical. But I was in the CS building. I was taking mostly CS classes. They're usually double. And then I also applied at Berkeley, and the department was called electrical and computer engineering. So it was everything together. So it doesn't matter at all, like, you know, what the name is. It matters. And it's so flexible. You can be in the physics department and taking a bunch of classes from electrical engineering that you're interested in. And the borders are really vague. Like, a lot of my friends did physics department, but they were doing devices like manufacturing of transistors. So it's very important to see what subject or what area you want to focus on, rather than is it electrical or is it computer science, or is that electrical has so many things. Like me and my best friend at Stanford, we had no classes in common with two of my best friends. The three of us had no class in common with each other at all. One of them was doing devices manufacturing. I was doing chip design, which is usually in a computer. You don't do like in the factory. And the third one was doing telecommunication and, you know, programming, machine learning. So I would say more opportunities are in the more software fields. So the more hardware it is, it doesn't mean there is no opportunities. There's a lot, but less than software. Software is so much easier to do remotely, to do from everywhere. There's a lot of companies that start. Hardware is more limited, but you do have an upside. You have upside that you know something that is really scarce. So I get like everywhere questions and emails, and every job that has to do with hardware, someone's going to reach out to me at some point. So you have these asset that it's very rare to know about hardware, but like if there is 100 companies of hardware searching for people, is 1,000 of software searching for people. So I mean, I'd say like I've gone so much between back and forth. So I still keep hardware as like a good asset, but I do love how fast software changes and how easy it is to make things happen, and how, you know, hardware you need like 2 years to make a chip. Software you need like maybe 2 weeks, and you can do something good if you have a team. Things like that. So I I would suggest you to look into professors, specific classes, specific areas that you want to become, knowledgeable on, and not look at, the title of the master's that you want to do. And I'm telling you, I also didn't know much. When you start for the first job, they're gonna ask more about like how good you are in terms of understanding things, and kind of what have you done in school, and less specifically on the industry. So I wouldn't say I worry. Just pick a few subjects that you like I like chip design, lots of Verilog, lots of HDL. Pick like a few classes and look at what is the continuation of those classes in the school that you want to go to, and just just go from there. And I'm happy to talk more to everyone offline. I'm just going to put my email here on the group chat, so you can email me anything you want. I'm happy to look at like classes or schools or resumes.
I have a question, but thanks. First, thanks for the presentation. It was very nice and concise. I'm at the very beginning of my PhD, and I'm working on machine learning. And I'm sure you know that the main bottlenecks in AI, it's like a massive amount of data and explainability. And what are the upcoming similar equivalent bottlenecks for IoT, if there are some?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it goes back to what I actually just mentioned on what enables IoT. So the chips are so small right now. It's great. That's not a bottleneck anymore. 5G and the wireless are still a bottleneck, because 5G have just started to deploy, and we've heard like things about 5G in the beginning, such as it's amazing, you're going to have double the speed, you're going to download a movie in 30 seconds and all of that. It's not anywhere close to that. It's going to happen in the next decade, but there's going to be so much need for changing infrastructure, basically like laying down fiber under the earth or any other way, or like coming up with these, boxes that you need to install. Most of the computers and most of the laptops and the phones don't even have a 5G chip. So we need to get into like a new generation. It's going to take like 5 to 10 years. So that's the main bottleneck. Like you can still connect. IPv6 was a big revolution. We could connect a lot more devices, but now we can basically still not connect way, more devices. Like I don't think we can handle billions of devices in the next like 40, 50 billions in the next 5, 10 years, unless 5G materializes completely, like as the hopes that they have put. The second part, in terms of data, it's similar to the machine learning. Like it's like so many amounts of data. Like what way are you going to visualize all of these data? There is like obviously a lot done already, but there is a lot to do. I mean, if you have 40 billions of like sensors or chips, how on earth are you going to make sense out of these in a way that you can take action? Like I told you, smart cities, you put all of these sensors on the traffic, and then you want to build a highway. From the sensors to building the highway is such a big way. It's like a huge, gap of like, how do I show this data in a way that helps me to figure out how to build this highway? So there's a lot of machine learning that needs to fill that gap, and a lot of, data processing analytics that you probably are going to work on to like make sure that from the use of the sensors to having actions are going to be, there's like, kind of like seamlessly connected and no gap. And I'm not sure if I answered your question in what you wanted.
That makes sense.
Great. There is another question on the chat. There are people who say that 5G could be dangerous for the health. No, 5G is not dangerous for the health at all. So let me explain you. I'll just give you like a 2-minute pitch on 5G. Okay, so what is dangerous for the health? I already mentioned it a little bit on like the healthcare stuff. So it's like X-rays and all of that, which like 5G and IoT is trying to help. So people don't get a lot of X-rays. So you get one and you get it right, and you don't have to get the message dosage, because the chips are so much better at like detecting and basically making it look not blurry. Anyway, so no, why is 5G not dangerous? What is 5G basically? 5G is exactly what you're having right now. It's 4G, it's 3G. It's just that 5G uses a spectrum of length, that of wavelengths and frequencies that is higher. So right now you're basically using a certain frequency to transmit data. That frequency is great, is strong, like it goes through walls, it goes through everything that you want. Now 5G is trying to use some lower and higher frequencies, or they're called millimeter wave. These higher frequencies and lower frequencies are not as strong, so they cannot go through walls, so they need repeaters in the house. So basically, if you're ever going to be afraid of anything, you got to be afraid so far that we've been using anything and everything just to talk. Now we're going to use these frequencies that are much lower in spectrum, that basically cannot even, transmit through a wall. And first of all, and second, these are like really, really infrared frequencies, which is like not dangerous at all. It's completely a new, it's like as far as you can get from X-rays and other things. So it's 5G is not dangerous. If anything, is way less dangerous than any frequencies that we have been using so far on our phones. Thank you. Yeah, I mean, if there is any other questions, feel free to ask now, or I also put my email down there. I'm happy to chat with any of you on your, specific situation. When I was, like younger, I had a bunch of, questions, and not all, I don't think I even had a bunch of questions. I was mostly didn't know what to ask. So if you want to describe your situation to me, I'd be happy to just brainstorm through it. I'm being asked if I can make the presentation in Albanian. I could. It's gonna be hard because all the terms I don't really know how to translate them. I can totally speak Albanian very, very well. I actually grew up in Albania. Most of my life was there. Still haven't been. I'm not old enough to have spent most of my life outside of Albania. But just the technical terms are very difficult. I was just asking the girls, like, how do you say IoT in Albanian, and all of these, the things that I'm used to only study in English and mostly in Greek because I went to college in Greece. But I can try. I mean, whatever you didn't understand, I'm happy to, maybe just give you a brief overview in Albanian.
Also, the reason that we actually asked Jona to give the presentation in English is because we have some international students that join our meetings, and it would be nice for them to understand the presentation as well. Okay, we have time for another question.
Okay, I think Arisa wants to ask. Yeah, go ahead.
Yes, I have a question. So you say that you are currently working with fintech and your interest has moved to the fintech. And like the buzzwords recently has been like Internet of Things and with the development of the blockchains and also fintech recently. So how you see, based on your experience that you have in many businesses, how you think that the Internet of Things will help or in a way will boost a bit the fintech, or how these two technologies will help each other, and what is like a use case or a very quick example, because you mentioned all the industries but you didn't mention finance.
Fintech, yeah. That's a good question. Okay, so the reason why I'm interested in fintech is because I just did an MBA. So, and I have a lot of technology background. So for me personally, I wanted to find the intersection between the things that I know how to do best. So I know like tech and I know finance. So what would for me be my future to get involved in that I use all of the knowledges that I've gained throughout the years. So that's why I picked fintech personally. Now, cryptocurrency and all that, I'm not probably going to do that. I'm like more interested in fintech as of like, banks are so old, so like out of date, so much bureaucracy. To send money to Albania, it takes 30 days and so much money. Like why? It's like, so we can make it so easy to like send money to each other. You can just press a button really quickly. You can do it in like 5 seconds in WeChat in China. And you can do it in Venmo in the US, not in 5 seconds, but a bit better than, you know, Europe. So like, and I know there's a bunch of cool banks in UK and London. And so that's what I'm interested in. Haven't really explored blockchain a lot. What's the connection with IoT? That's a very good question. I mean, like, how would I see IoT and fintech? Well, I didn't mention it because fintech is like really a bit nascent right now. It has a lot to do on itself. I don't see IoT for me is a lot hardware related. So all the things that I mentioned have sensors, have chips, have hardware. So fintech is on itself like software, you know. I don't see any, you know, immediate kind of like connections. I could see like, you know, if there is any, for example, fintech in the US, you could pay with like your phone immediately, and there's like a lot of devices that like you don't even have to put your phone in. Let's say I just have my phone in my pocket and I just say like Siri pay with my Visa card or Siri pay with my MasterCard, and through Bluetooth it pays. So that's the only thing I see, you know, as like IoT sensors and fintech in the payment industry, kind of like more when you have to do with parts of the hardware. Like Square is a very good company that is based out of here that has hardware parts of the fintech. So that's where I see IoT getting into mostly. But other than that, in like blockchains or things like that, not yet. More maybe with like machine learning leading into IoT, but anywhere that there is hardware, I definitely see IoT getting into fintech. I don't know if I was clear.
Thank you.
My pleasure.
By the way, do you see like IoT playing a crucial role in predicting the prices of commodities in stock market better than traditionally?
Not really. That's more like high frequency trading, or basically like you try to predict with like quantum and stuff like that. So I don't see IoT right now, as I said, getting anywhere that there is no hardware. So the only thing that predicting the stock market uses for hardware is like a lot of, you know, predicting algorithms and machine learning and like kind of pattern recognition, which is just like a normal, you know, high powerful computing, or like quantum computing basically. Recently, that's the only thing I see as like a connection. As of now, no, I think that's like not anywhere close, right? You never know. It might be like a decade close. When I say not anywhere close, it's probably not in the next 2-3 years. Okay. I can't speak for more with this industry or with any tech industry that changes by the day, basically.
Okay. No, I just heard like an example where 2 Sigma, they were using satellite images to predict like the wells in the Middle East. And they were...
Yeah, well, I had an interview with them actually like a couple of months ago, but they are only based in New York. Yeah, I mean, maybe, yeah, like you said, who knows, they could have all of these things, but it for me is like a lot more, they're using satellites and stuff, it's a lot more machine learning rather than IoT is more about like tiny sensors everywhere in my mind. But there's so many definitions, it could totally, you know, put it into the IoT definition.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you. Thank you very much, guys. And as I said, feel free to email me anytime. Happy to answer any questions offline.
Hey, Jona, thank you very much for joining us. And thank you guys for joining us as well. I want to make a last announcement. Our next kind of episode of Albanian Role Models in Technology will be on the 2nd of July, where we'll have as a keynote speaker Julia Stefani with a wonderful career. I won't reveal any details, but just join us on the 2nd of July to learn more from another Albanian role model. So yes,
she's a very good friend of mine.
Yeah. So, and actually, all of you guys, if you know some role models that you want us to invite for a presentation, just feel free to propose any names. Okay, so thank you very much and see you next time.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.
Right.